Thanks for joining us today for Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our Webinar Wednesday program. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday and are provided complimentary. They're recorded and can be downloaded from our website and YouTube channel, which now holds over 300 of our government contracting webinars. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, so if you have questions for our speaker, we will have his information on the last slide of the presentation today. A special thanks to our educational sponsor, the National Veteran Small Business Coalition, for making these webinars possible. The NVSBC is the largest nonprofit trade association for veterans. Please visit their website for more information. And now a little bit about us. We work with U.S. federal government contractors, including product, service, and software firms. Our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles and compliance. More information is on our website. We also have opportunities for your organization to advertise in our newsletter. We now reach over 20,200 subscribers, and this includes both contractors and government. Contact us for pricing information with the email shown on your screen. And now to introduce our speaker, Mark Snyderman. Welcome, Mark. We're glad to have you here with us today, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today about a very interesting topic, which is the interplay of government contracting, compliance, and ethics. Next slide, please. So ethics and compliance are, it's typically you hear about these things discussed separately. You hear we'll talk on the ethics side or we'll talk on compliance, and there's very little connection. And I've done some research in this area, and it's a disconnected area. And one of the things that our firm has been saying for the past few years is you really can't separate these things. The ethical fiber of the company drives and serves the compliance program, and it also helps build your culture. So whereas we see these concentrics, these circles separated, and people talk on culture, they talk on compliance, they talk on ethics, we'd like to try to put that conversation together. So one of the things, you hear the phrase, if culture eats strategy for breakfast. We've extended that phrase and say, if culture eats strategy for breakfast, ethics are the fork and the knife. And I'll explain that as we kind of go forward and you start to understand how ethics fits into your compliance program and also fits into your overall culture of your company. Next slide, please. So what is ethics? Kind of a big question and to try to do in a couple slides here, but we'll do it anyway. Really to define it, you're going to define it as the discipline dealing with what's good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. It's the decisions, the choices, it's the actions that we make that reflect and enact our values, our set of moral principles. It's the theory behind it. And really, I kind of look at it as just the guiding philosophy. What is the ethical fiber of your company? Next slide, please. And, personal and business ethics can vary, and they can vary from person to person. They vary by situation, they vary by culture. Your ethics are influenced by your family, your peers. So in the workplace, it could be your employees, your managers, experiences. Like being rewarded or punished for certain behavior changes the way people act and the way they build their moral code. So next slide, please. What about business ethics? Is that an oxymoron? No, it's not. It is actually a field of study. It is the moral compass of the business. And we like to think in terms of the ethical culture of the business. What are the policies and the decision-making processes used by employees when they face an ethical dilemma? And if you look at the graphic we have up, business ethics is it's a compilation of a lot of different factors. It's looking for responsibility, you could call it accountability, trust, behaviors, reliability, morality, choices that we make, the relationships that are formed, and all those things combined will drive at the actual field that we call business ethics, so which is really just the ethics of the business, right? So as we start to think about how the ethics are going to interact with your culture and your compliance programs, we start to see that these factors are the same factors that are driving at the culture, right? So the ability to have do you have accountability within your organization? Is there morality? These are not just ethical pieces, these are cultural pieces as well. So next slide, please. So regulation has also driven at the compliance programs that we have in effect today. and what we're supposed to have in effect for a compliance program. In particular, as government contractors, we have significant, numbers of rules and regulations sitting on top of us, and these have grown over time. They've grown from starting in the 60s with environmental pollution laws, and then they drove into the Consumer Bill of Rights in 1962. In the 70s, we move on to Ralph Nader and consumer protectionism, the Clean Water Act of 1972. And the 80s is when we start to see the defense industry have initiatives on business ethics. And these start to drive into the 90s, where they change the federal sentencing guidelines and compliance programs become mandatory. We go to the 2000s with Sarbanes-Oxley and the SOX compliance and anti-corruption, so Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So now we start to see the globalization of the regulation and the need for compliance. And in the 2010s, we get Dodd-Frank banking regulations, the OECD Anti-Corruption Act. And now we're seeing a retrenchment. In the current administration, we have decreasing regulation and less focus on compliance and ethics. So we see a sort of a pendulum of movement amongst the regulations that have come about. And what do those drive at? They drive at building compliance programs and actually speaking to the ethical fiber of the company. And when you look at all this regulation, what have we actually accomplished? What has happened in business in the last 10 to 20 years, or the environment that surrounds us, to say, all these programs have worked, or have they not worked? Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the real failures in the past few years. Goldman Sachs, they cheated all their own customers. Penn State University, they had a culture of silence surrounding a large-scale problem of harassment and violation and sexual harassment. The Madoff claims, the largest Ponzi scheme in history, happened. Wells Fargo, as part of the foreclosure crisis, followed by fake account setups. Equifax, they had one of the largest breaches of data in the world. They failed to disclose it for 6 weeks. Their own executives were trading on that information that they knew that they had failed to disclose a breach, and were trading insider trading. So what does this tell us? Where's the failure? The failure is on the ethics side, right? And the ethics are what's driving. So you could have a compliance program. Each one of these institutions has significant compliance programs in place. Lots of attorneys, lots of compliance officers. But why did they fail? They fail because the ethics aren't there. And the ethics are the foundation. If without the foundation, the house falls down. Next slide. So when we talk about misconduct, what do we look for examples of common misconduct that starts to give rise to questions as to what is the fiber of the company? How strong are the ethics? How strong is the compliance program itself? Misrepresenting hours worked. Employees lie to their supervisors. Management lies to its own employees, to the customers, to vendors, to the public. Misuse of organizational assets, maybe lying on some reports, falsifying records, sexual harassment, workplace violence, stealing, theft, accepting or giving bribes or kickbacks. So when people accept gifts, when there's gift policies and they don't follow the gift policy and they accept gifts anyway, withholding needed information from your employees, from customers, the public. Next slide, please. What are the penalties if you act unethically? There's monetary penalties, which can be significant. There's jail time. And then in government contracting, we have what's called suspension and debarment. That's actual economic jail. The government the government only does business with responsible contractors. And a responsible contractor has a compliance program in place that is based on ethics and based in good training. This is serious stuff, right? So let's say you're a contractor and you're doing business with the government and you have mischarging or a fraudulent claims act violation, something along those lines, and it really will stem from an unethical company. right? Somewhere where you have issues with the ethical fiber. What happens? Suspension or debarment from government contracting. They could suspend any further government contracts from being awarded to your company. It's essentially a death sentence for the company. Most companies cannot withstand being suspended or debarred for any period of time. Next slide, please. So we at Snyderman Law Group have developed what we call the SLG Culture Core. And what we're trying to show here is that ethics is part and parcel of your compliance program and your culture. The center of the pentagram is the mission, values, and goals and beliefs of the company, and then which drives at your ethical fiber, right? Your ethics, your what is the moral compass that's guiding the company? That drives your culture. And what are the factors that determine and help put this all together? That's your core, right? So your core is your mission, your ethics, your culture. But what's driving at the core? What's making the core work? It's communication, your leadership, it's education and training, it's management, and it's compliance, right? So each level of the company has their drives at what creates the ethical being and the culture of the company. Next slide, please. So, like I said, I think I said this before, company culture and compliance programs are houses of cards. And the foundation card is the one that's missing if there's no ethical fiber. So we have to look at the intersection of compliance and ethics as concentric circles. And you have to look at the connected influencers on why. How do you get to the ethical fiber and what's creating that culture? Next slide, please. So why do you need a compliance program? If you have a strong ethics, if you have strong ethics and you feel like the company has a moral vision and the leadership and management and employees are all bought in, do you need a compliance program? Do you need to be able to show that? Well, yes, you do. The FAR mandates it. 52203.13 mandates that contractors establish and maintain an ethics and compliance program. Contractor Code of Ethics, Business Ethics and Conduct is required in solicitations and contracts where the value is expected to exceed 5.5 million and the performance period is 120 days or more. Next slide, please. So awards can only be made to responsible contractors. FAR 9103 says purchases shall be made from and contracts shall be awarded to responsible prospective contractors only. This is public policy. The government through the FAR is upholding the public's trust in the government purchasing system. So when we say responsible contractors, responsible prospective contractors, we're looking for contractors that have compliance programs. They state their ethics. They know what they're doing and they're teaching and they're making sure that employees are trained and understand and get the need for compliance and the ethical standards that the company is going to be held to. Next slide, please. So, like I said before, non-compliance, even as a small business, leaves you on a hook for a host of problems. So what kind of problems do companies see when they don't have compliance programs? Or even companies that have compliance may see these issues. And we'll talk about what the difference is in a second. False Claims Act violations. So that's, essentially mischarging, making claims on invoices that are incorrect, breach of contract, negative CPARS ratings, your contractor performance assessment reporting system ratings. These have become even more and more critical in the past few years with the change in the way contracts are being awarded and rated. If you look at some of the recent contracts like Oasis and STARS and some of the GSA vehicles, they are specifically counting your CPARS ratings, and without positive CPARS ratings, you're ineligible to even go after these large-scale contracts. And these large-scale contracts are critical to your operation for both small businesses and large businesses. So ensuring that you have strong CPARS ratings is really important. Not having a strong compliance program will absolutely create environments where you may see negative performance ratings. And then there's violations of a host of other federal laws that can happen. So if you are a responsible contractor and you prove that you have a strong compliance program and a strong ethics program in place under the Federal Sentencing Act, sentencing guidelines, you can be held as a responsible contractor and avoid suspension and debarment. So this is critical to your operations. It's no longer a question of, can I just do I need to do this? Do I have, should I do this? This is a must do for government contractors to ensure that you have a strong program in place and a strong ethical fiber and being to your company. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but it is the thing to do to ensure that you're going to stay in business. Next slide, please. So what's fundamental? I think we've said it a bunch of times now. The ethical fiber is fundamental to that strong, effective compliance program. You got to teach it, you got to preach it, you got to live it, and you got to love it. Next slide, please. So you can create an ethical fiber. You can help shape the ethical fiber of your company by design. I'm going to give you a couple steps that you can start to look at. Some practical guidelines here. I always try to do that when we do these webinars, and one of the things that these webinar series have been great at, we watch a lot of them ourselves, and we watch them online on YouTube, is helping give practical advice to government contractors in the field, especially small businesses. How do you create and how do you manage through all of these, maze of regulations? Next slide, please. Step one, I want you to meet as a team and develop your ethics statement. It's really not just the tone from the top. You got to get consensus here. Brainstorm this. Get your team together. Write your core values on Post-it notes. I didn't finish this slide, so I'll finish it here. So take the slides, have everybody write 4 or 5 core values on a Post-it note. Take those Post-it notes and put them in the front of the room on the wall. Now take those, and somebody has to be the leader of the brainstorm session, usually the CEO or the COO, and look for common themes. Group the Post-it notes together. It's convergence divergence exercises. You can look these up on the web. They're pretty simple and strategic for strategic consultants. And then you can start to group together, and you will see that a core set of values will come out. And what that does is it ensures that the team is building your compliance and your ethics program from the ground up together. And that's so important in terms of how to create the proper ethical culture. Next slide, please. Step 2, you implement this code of ethics. So you take those standards that you all came up with, the moral and ethical compass of the organization, write them out, declare them to the world, make it a formal document, distribute it, put it on your website, make all your employees read it, acknowledge that they have it, keep those acknowledgments in their files. Adopt the code of ethics into your terms and conditions. So when a company comes to do business with you, they know who you are and what you stand for as a company, and that you will stand up for those principles. And that's really, really an important concept. Next slide. Should be step 3, conduct ethics training. Set your company standard for how it does business. Make it formal. Distribute it. So when you do training, make sure that the people that are your employees are being trained in what's right and wrong. Give them hypotheticals. Teach them through hypotheticals. You can find lots of samples of these online. You can probably go back to your college ethics courses, because most of us had to take Ethics 101 during college. If you didn't sleep through it like I did, you would have a good understanding of what it takes to teach that. Next slide. Institute hirings for ethics. Ask questions in interviews to understand the moral compass of the person. Ensure cultural fit and ethics across all hires. I can't stress this enough. When you can teach how to do something, but you can't teach culture and ethics. You can't teach somebody to be an ethical person. You have to hire correctly. And if you find that when you hire somebody and they are not the right fit for your organization, that's a cancer that is going to be difficult to manage along the way. Typically, you want to try to rip that out early. So, you hear the phrase, be slow to hire and quick to fire. If you don't find that somebody's fitting into your moral compass in your organization, they need to go, because they will bring your ethical foundation down. And it only takes one person. It only takes one rogue employee to ruin the company. Next slide. Make ethics part of your reviews. Performance reviews can include adherence to mission and integrity. Make it part of what you talk about with your employees. Don't just assume that they know, that they remember that they signed the code of ethics. Maybe they took one training class. Talk about it on a consistent basis. And I'm a firm believer that reviews are not an annual experience; they are an ongoing experience. And if you can, use 360. Talk to the other employees, talk to their managers, talk to other leadership, reach out to vendors or customers that they speak with. Get an understanding of who your employees are and what they're doing, and talk with them about it. That's the best way to train. That's the best way to ensure that everybody's on the same page, and that's how you avoid, needing to show that you have the compliance program. So next slide. I'm a big fan of Dilbert, so I gave you a Dilbert cartoon to sort of end things. He's sitting at the table. He says, "We want a huge government contract. Now we need to follow all of our company policies plus every government procurement rule. I feel like I'm being smothered by a damp mattress. That's what victory feels like." And, for those of us that have been in this business for quite a while, it does sometimes feel like we're being smothered by a damp mattress. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, but in the end, if you can show and you have a good, strong ethical fiber to your company, it will drive the right compliance program, it will drive the right culture, and you will be doing the right things, and it won't be so bad. That's all I have for today. Next slide, please. This is my contact information. You can reach me at mark@snydermanlawgroup.com. It's my cell number, 646-242-3862. I hope you enjoyed a small talk on the intersection of government contracting compliance and ethics. And I'd like to thank Jen Schaus again for having me today. Always a pleasure, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for a great presentation and sharing your time with us. And thank you to everyone who joined us. The recording will be on our website and YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. Please join us this Friday as we cover each part of the FAR, and join us next Wednesday for more hot topics in federal contracting.